welcome to today's video. We will be talking about the identity wheel for today's homework module. Let's begin. Here's just a brief agenda of what we'll be doing in this short video. We will be reviewing some language, creating a space where all identities are welcomed, exploring our own identities, and completing the homework sheet that is provided here, as well as some follow-up homework questions that will be sent in through the form like you've been doing with your other homework modules. So let's begin. Two terms that I just wanted to put out there. I will be talking about implicit bias, which is an attitude that we hold without realizing that we hold against a specific social group. Again, this is without realizing, without harmful intent, but these are things that have been ingrained in us that we are going to try to think about and maybe overcome so we can go into a mediation without these stereotypes or implicit bias, and make sure that everyone feels heard and welcomed in the mediation space. I will also be talking about social identities. So these are identities that can be claimed, that a person feels they have, they fit within a group or have a membership within. So this is typically the page that we would hand out, and I'll be talking a little bit more about what this means and what this looks like. There's also a little blurb about social identities, which I think is really helpful to read through on your own, as well as the purpose of thinking about yourself and your own identities and why that matters when we go into a mediation specifically. There are also examples of identities on this sheet of genders, races, social classes, etc. Not all of them are listed, but we think it's a great jumping off point to kind of think about identities, especially for folks that haven't really done a lot of this internal reflection before. It's a great place to start, but it's important to note that they are not all listed here. So please feel free to add any identities that you feel are missing. Again, these are some of the examples of identities that are not all here, as well as two other definitions down at the bottom of marginalized groups versus privileged groups, and how those take place in our day-to-day life, with or without realizing. So if I were to fill this out based on the questions in the middle of this identity wheel, the first question asks, what identities do I think about most often? And for me, one thing that I think a lot about is my gender as a woman. I think about, just about that identity and how that impacts how I talk to people, how people talk to me, how I'm treated, what I wear, what I don't wear, based on how I've been socialized. And so that's something that I really think a lot about. I really think about how I am a woman and how I move about the world and the choices that I make. And yeah, that is, my gender is something that I think a lot about. And for number two, identities that I think about least often, while I speak English, it's not something that I often think about or think about the fact that, why this is important. And typically, identities that we don't really think about most are things that we may benefit from. Not always, but because I don't think about English as my first language, it might mean that I benefit from that. Just like the opposite with my gender, I think a lot about my gender because of the way that I'm treated in society or how I want to be perceived by others. And that typically is because of the way that I am treated, sometimes poorly because of my gender. So think about, when you think about your identities, when you think about your identity that you think about most often, why do you think that is? And the identities that you think about the least, why do you think that is? Is that because of how you're treated or because of something else? Again, they are different for everyone, and so feel free to explore that. There are three other questions that are included about identities, and please feel free to think through those as well. And really, really take the time to either draw an identity wheel yourself and kind of list out in little boxes, or print this page out, and really dive deeper into who you are and what groups you may claim if you feel comfortable to do so. So how does this relate to us as mediators? As I mentioned before at the beginning with the term implicit bias, we may accidentally treat people unfairly or unequally based on their identities that we may see, or identities that we may not see but think that they have, or maybe they do hold them. And this is due to things like stereotypes. And again, this is important to us as mediators, is because of course we want everyone to have a fair treatment when in a mediation. We're supposed to be a neutral party. We're supposed to, again, remain neutral between both folks, or however many folks are in the room. And so it's really important to not be swayed or not um, give more attention to one party based on their identity than the other. So one example of this is if I am a co-mediator in a parent and child case, like I mentioned here on this slide, I may treat the parent with more respect without even realizing. This is because of my implicit bias. I see the parent as the adult and the authority, and they are, they're older and they're wiser. They know more than the child. And so if I'm nodding my head and I'm agreeing with what the parents are saying, and then the child isn't getting reframing, or I'm not summarizing back for them, they may feel as though there's a power imbalance there. And, we definitely want everyone in a mediated space, because we are supposed to be a neutral party, for everyone to be treated with the same respect, no matter what identities they hold. And I may not even realize I'm doing it, but it's important for me to go into mediations and think about, especially during mediators breaks specifically, think about, how am I treating both parties or all the parties involved? And is there anything that I'm doing that would make someone feel negatively about how I'm treating them or treating another person? So I think that this is a great example of, it's not that I don't respect the child involved or think that they know nothing. I just may have this unconscious action or thought that the parent knows best or the parent knows more, um, when they came into mediation for an equal playing field. Um, yeah. So please consider how your implicit bias may show up in mediation. Feel free to pause this video, um, and take a look at the worksheet that was a few slides back, explore your identities, and then complete the form in the Google Classroom. And again, continue to think about which elements of your identity do you think you are most aware of, and which elements do you think parties might be most aware of. And feel free to keep those things to yourself. We won't be asking for the physical identity sheet, but we will be asking for you to answer those questions before our next session. So thank you so much. I hope you learned something new. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me or the team. Thanks. Bye.